Hello everybody, good evening. Welcome to FB Chatter. Today we are with Vinita Dawra Nangia talking about the topic storytelling is often influenced by people, real people around us. But how do we create a content or impact, right kind of impact without keeping that person in picture? So Vinita is an executive editor, author and columnist with Times of India. With over 2 decades of experience in journalism, Vinita is now director of Times India's Literature Festivals. In 2015, she conceptualized and launched Write India, a platform for short stories with leading authors. Welcome to the show, ma'am.
Thank you, Geetika. Very happy to be here, and hello everybody online.
So we'll start this session with a very basic question: that how is the art of storytelling different from other kinds of writing?
Yeah, well, starting back from the kind of writing that we did in, say, school, when we were forced to write essays on my family. I think everybody, all of us must have written an essay on my family. And then going on to a phase, when you get emotional and you fight with your siblings and you want to write something. So you come back home and you start a personal diary. And that's where all the fights begin, because you write something about your sister, about your mother, and then they'll read your diary. And then there are fights and all. So writing is always fraught with emotions. So that's one thing that I've seen is kind of regular and consistent in all kinds of writing. So there's some form of emotion over there. But then from there, if you come to newspaper writing, the kind of articles that come in newspapers, which we read every day, we are taught that those must not have any form of emotion at all. So you have to distance yourself from that emotion and only stick to facts and what's happened. So you're reporting an incident, you're reporting something that's happened. And there, of course, you will not bring in emotion because you're not even supposed to editorialize it. So no opinions, no emotion. You're only expected to state facts so that people know what happened. Then again, in the same newspaper, there will be an edit page where you're supposed to give in the edits, and so you'll give your opinions. Then there are features. In features, you will go a little further and you will analyze. You will analyze that there's certain news that's happened. For instance, if a 30-year-old woman has committed suicide somewhere, you will say that, okay, in the last 1 month, 5 30-year-old women committed suicide. Why did it happen? You will analyze it. You will give your opinion. You'll talk about it. Different from all this is the kind of fiction that we read and we write and we are also fond of. And in fiction, of course, there's the only limit is your own imagination, and you pick up from real life or you pick up bits from your creative imagination and you put it all together. So that's a very entertaining form of writing fiction.
So, like storytelling can be in every form we write, whether fiction has storytelling, but in non-fiction also some kind of storytelling is there.
Yes, of course, yes. So storytelling, if we widen the meaning of storytelling, I really spoke about storytelling in a very focused format, as in stories which are related to fiction. But yes, of course, we tell stories every day. We have everyday stories in our lives. Even the advertisements that you watch on TV or you see in a newspaper or a magazine, they are also stories being told to you. Each one of us has stories to tell, which we tell in our everyday lives. Even when we sit at home and gossip about the aunt living next door, that in itself is a story. So you come home, you exaggerate some incident that has happened, you try to bring in a sense of humor to it, you're telling it to a friend or you're telling it to your family, those are also stories. So all of us tell stories in our lives. So storytelling is even going to a party and starting a conversation where you tell about some instances, some bits and pieces of your life, yourself. Yes, storytelling is something we do all the time and in various formats.
So, what is the use of storytelling? Is it just a form of entertainment?
No, not at all. It is definitely a form of entertainment. That's the form that we all love best. We read stories, we watch them on TV in the form of series, we watch them in movies. But apart from that, stories are something that are very important in our everyday lives, not just our personal lives, but even in businesses, in our offices, everywhere stories are very important. Geetika, when somebody tells you some fact or somebody is recounting some actual numbers or facts and telling you something, you will kind of listen to it, but it will only stick in your mind if they narrate it to you with the example of a person or an incident. Because we like to pay attention to and understand people and incidents that happen in their lives more. So you
Yes.
will, stories that way will stick to your mind. So when somebody tells you something about a person and brings in another person, it'll stay with you much longer. Which is why most companies will use these kind of stories to advertise, because then the message sticks in your mind longer. We
Yeah.
use stories in even in offices and all. Smart managers in offices will always use stories to build a company culture. To they will have always some story related to the owner of the company, some story related to the history of the company. That helps build up the brand, and it helps build up the organization and the structure of the company. And those stories are something that you narrate to each other, tell each other, and they keep growing bigger and bigger as you go on. And that lends itself to the building up of an organization as well.
Yeah, it's like sort of image the as and जैसे जैसे हम सुन रहे हैं वैसे वैसे एक पिक्चर बनती जाती है दिमाग में एंड इट्स लाइक कि वो पिक्चर से वी गेट कनेक्टेड कि yes there is this happened at that time and we remember it for a
Yeah,
long time.
yes.
So
We all like
uh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we all like our emotions to be touched. And when you tell stories about other people or your own lives, then your emotion and when your emotions get touched, or when you hear something humorous and you laugh at it, or something tragic and you cry over it, and you're able to relate to something that happens to another person, those are the things that really touch you and remain with you.
So
And
it's
all that
like
happens in stories.
yeah. So it's like human brain relates to visuals much faster. Does that mean that the best stories are told through visual stimulation, like through movies, theater, or oral storytelling?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say so, because, yes, obviously, when you watch it, it's when you're viewing a movie or when you're viewing a play or you're even hearing somebody tell you a story, there's always that visual stimulation in front of you. But I think that most of us have very vivid imaginations. So when we are even reading a story, and if you have a visual imagination and you're able to build up the characters and the scenarios in your mind, and you're
Hmm.
able to actually imagine the tableau things as they are happening, sometimes that can play itself out like a movie also. Frankly, what happens with me very often, and I've mentioned this to people, is after reading a good book or watching a good movie, after some time, I forget whether it was a movie or a book,
Yeah.
because imagination has been so vivid. You've
Yes.
actually seen the characters, you've actually seen the incidents happening and felt that emotion even while
Yes.
reading it. So after some time, you tend to think, did I watch it or was I reading it? It happens to me very often. I'm sure it happens to all others here as well.
Yes. Yes. We get so involved in that particular story, book, or entertainment form that it's like,
Yeah.
yes, we have lived that life and we'll
Yes,
come back.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Can just anyone tell a story? Are there any special characteristics required in a good storyteller?
See, everyone can and everyone does tell stories. Even a 2-year-old comes over to their mother or the father and tells a story about how he was like, it may be a lie, it may be the truth, but the fact that he's coming, remembering, um, uh, relating some emotions to it and coming and telling his or her father or mother about it, he's telling a story. From his side, he's telling a story. So all of us can tell stories, but yes, they can be good storytellers, they can be bad storytellers. They can be somebody who comes into a room and goes to a group and starts talking about even the most mundane incident in such a manner, a little exaggeration, a little bit of humor, a little bit of perspective to it, and it becomes a great story. Everybody loves hearing it. On the other hand, there could be someone who's got the greatest incident or story to narrate, but he just doesn't have the skills.
Can't do
So
it.
he's not able to tell it. I think it's very important to be able to connect to the listener or the reader or the watcher,
Yeah.
whoever your audience is, to your
Who's
audience.
listening?
Yes, because if you're not able to connect with the audience or to understand what the audience wants, you will never be able to be a great storyteller. Like, you can't tell the same kind of story to 5-year-old kids as you would
Yeah.
to
And
people in their middle age, possibly, because the perspectives would be completely different and things they would relate to would be completely different. So a person who understands that the need to connect to the audience would always be a better storyteller than another. Then I think it's very important to have a good imagination. But even more important than a good imagination, I always say that a good sense of observation is very important. So
yes.
there are people
How
who
you
will always observe, who will always keep looking at others, keep watching people watching, even sometimes hearing bits of conversations at a restaurant, at a bus stand, at a station, at an airport, and hear little interesting tidbits. Keep thinking about it. It keeps playing in their mind, and they are able to build stories out of it. And observing people's faces, observing their body language, observing the way people talk, the way they walk, everything about them. So a good sense of observation, good imagination, a sense of humor always helps. And then, if you're telling a story, the way you modulate your voice, if you're able to bring in the emotions and all, and if you're writing, then your writing skills have to be such that you're able to capture the scenario and emotion. So there are various characteristics that a good story writer needs to have.
like how we observe and maintain, how can we like make it again to be listening, and audience is interested, and how we can make it more interesting for particular audience. Basically connectivity is also important, and for whom you
Yes.
are narrating it.
Absolutely, yes. That's the most important thing, who you're telling the story to. And India
And
has had a has had a tradition of storytelling. We started with oral storytelling, then we even tell stories through murals, through paintings. We've told
yes,
stories through our ballads. We've told stories through puppetry. When you have puppets, there's puppets also telling
yes,
stories. So India is a great place for, great country for storytelling. We have a history of that. And the world over also, if you really look at it, Gitika, have you ever thought about how storytelling in different parts of the world are similar? The place may be different, the place that the story is told in. The names of the characters will be vastly different from one country to another or one tribe to another across the world. But the characteristics of the people about whom the stories are told remain the same. The good man will always have the same qualities and the bad person will always have the same qualities. So those basic moral values, what is good, what is bad, the basic characteristics of the good people and the bad people, they always remain the same. That's interesting, isn't it?
Bilkul. And I feel that there's always an emotional connect. Indian audiences are like, including me also, we get connected to more emotional series. And if we read something emotional or emotional things, or we bought something, so we have a better connect with that story, and we remember it for a long time. Maybe a novel or a column that yes, this happened to that particular person, and then we
Yeah.
take out the lessons we learn from that. That this happened to that, इस तरह होना चाहिए और ऐसा हमें अपनी जिंदगी में यूज करना चाहिए. So there is always an emotionally humor is obviously important, because उसके बिना भी everybody won't like to always be serious reading and doing it.
Mhm.
But yes, it is a mixture for to be a good storyteller.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, see, it's very important to, we are all individuals in our own place. We are all, basically, we are social animals. We want to, and we do live in communities together with people. And we always like to know that, the emotions that I'm going through are the same emotions that other people also go through. The thoughts that I'm thinking are also the thoughts that other people think. The tragedies and the good things that are happening to me in my life are the same that happen to other people. So ultimately, you want to feel connected to the rest of the world. You want to feel connected to other people. And stories are a great way of telling you that, yes, you are like what other people are. Other people also go through the same things that you do. So there's that deep reassurance that these stories give us.
Definitely. And that's why we come to a question that often we get inspiration for stories from people around us. But how do
Yes.
we tell a story without revealing that the identity of that person? Is it ethical to use another person's story?
Yeah. Okay. So this is, a problem that I come up with every week. I write a weekly column in Times of India
Yes.
called Ozone. And when you write a weekly column which is carried on for years and years, you are picking up inspiration, and you're picking up stories from people around you, from the environment around you, from what you go through in your life, whatever happens in your life, you pick up stories from there. So it is bound to happen that somebody will come up to you, and because I write a lot on relationships as well, so people will come up to me, tell me their story, and then I'm inspired to write something about it, because every week when you have to write, you need something to write about. So it's a challenge that I face every week. And I've seen that the best thing to do is always, once you let your imagination run riot, you think about it, you see what you want to actually write in a story or a column or wherever, it's always best to check with the person. Even if you are telling their story by changing their name, or whether you're telling it with their permission, with their names, it's best to share with the person that, okay, I am using your story, but I'm being sensitive enough to be not revealing your name. I'm going to change your name. And if you want me to change other circumstances, I'll do that also. So do I have your permission to do that? That's the best thing to do. But at other times, if you've just used it as a spark to inspire yourself, and you're writing something which is quite different, but you've only used one incident to spark it off, then it's completely your own story. You've changed it and it's become something else. After all,
Yes.
at this stage, like they say, that there are no original ideas. All ideas have been taken up and have been worked upon. All kinds of stories have been
Somewhere.
written. And it's just, we are now only regurgitating the old ideas. So we are adding our bit, our perspective, our imagination to the same old ideas, the same old stories, and then bringing out different stories from there. So that's bound
Yes,
to happen.
because the perspective is always different. Something has
Yeah.
happened to somebody, and how we visualize it and what lessons do we take from that incident is totally different. And then we can weave it into a different, like to-do list or a helpful blog kinds or a column, so that yes, somewhere some percent of influence is there from people around or from happenings around the world. But yes,
Yeah.
we can tweak
Also,
it, and
Ritika, like lessons learned. Everybody needs to
that is
learn
possible.
from other people's experiences. When we hear of somebody else's experience, we take inspiration from them. We learn lessons from their lives. So that's how stories are told all the time. So there are some people who are brave enough and want to share their stories openly with their, giving their names and all. And there are others who want to hide their actual persona, and but do want to share their story.
And how can one be a good storyteller?
uh, by being true to yourself. I think that's very important, to be absolutely true to yourself and confident of your
Actually,
own thinking, of your imagination, of your creativity, by being very sensitive. It's very important to be sensitive, like we just discussed. If it's somebody else's story, you have to be
yeah.
sensitive to their emotions. And sensitivity also helps you to connect with your audience. That thing of sensitivity also helps you connect with your audience. And practicing. If you are writing, if you're writing a story, writing, as I'm very fond of saying, and you will hear it often, is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the better it will be, the better
Better
it
it
will work.
becomes.
So you have to read a lot, read other people's stories, listen to other people's stories, and you have to write, keep writing, so that it's good practice for you always. That
And then
helps.
slowly the original voice also comes in. Like it never becomes like
Absolutely.
we are copying, because we are inspired by many authors and many columnists. We want to be like them. We keep reading
Yes.
them. So somewhere connect is there that we may be writing like them, but with practice we will get our own voice
Yes,
sometimes.
it's very important to do that, because if you don't have anything to say, how can you be a storyteller? You have to have something to say which is over and above what you've seen, or what you've heard, or what you've read or watched. You have to have your own perspective, and that is the most important thing. I don't know if most of our viewers here have heard about Write India, which is a project that we started with Times of India,
Yes.
which is all about storytelling. It's like a short story contest every month. We get thousands of short stories from participants, and it is a pleasure to read those stories. Really, we go through those stories, and you realize that how many different ways there are of telling the
Yeah.
same story.
Same
Same
story.
story again and again, again and again, but in different ways, different perspectives. So no two people will ever be able to tell the same story in the same way from beginning till end. There will always be differences, just like
Different.
two people can never be exactly the same. So you do leave your imprint on a story, whether you tell it or you make it into a movie or you write it as a story. So that beauty is always there, that beauty of creativity and your own personal stamp on that story.
There are some comments in comment section. We can take one of. Can you see the comments on your screen?
Okay, I'm trying to. As of now, I can't see anything. Would you like to read it out to me, Deepika?
Yeah, I'll read them out. Suchita is asking, how do you know you have connected to your reader through your story?
Um, so when you're writing a story, obviously you're asking because when you're telling a story, then you can just look into their eyes and you know whether you've connected or not. By whether they are paying attention or they're
Yes,
looking around for an escape and want to just get away from that. So writing itself, when you're writing, that is the difficult one because you are not really sitting in front of your audience or your reader.
you know.
I think the best way to do this is that after your flow of writing is complete, you've written your story out, you must give it a little distance and a little time, and then come back to the story yourself like a fresh reader, and then read it again from beginning till end. Every time you read it, you'll find that you can, cut out a little bit, and you'll find there are places where you're yourself getting a little confused. So you'll know exactly the places where the reader is going to get confused and where the reader is going to be able to relate. So if the incidents are picked up from life itself, everybody can relate. If they are highly imaginative, maybe some people can't relate. But you have to be able to explain it well enough. So reading again and again, editing again and again will help you a lot with that.
And maybe we can give it to some beta readers also before publishing. That
Oh
helps.
yes, if it's for publishing, then definitely. If you're writing the story for publishing, it will go through that process. You can give it to some people you really trust, but no idea giving it to your friends and family who will tell you, hey, what a
They'll
great
not be.
story. Yeah, it's nice to give it to a professional. It's good to give it to a professional who will be able to point out what the issues are. And in any case, any publisher would edit the story and come back to you with comments.
Okay, there's another one. Aleha is asking, how long would that be before we go back to the story? The
Uh,
time.
yeah, it depends on how much time you have and when you really feel like going back to it. Like when I write my column, for instance, which is very often like stories, I don't have time. I'm always pushing against a deadline. So I write it out and then try to wipe my mind clean and within 10 minutes go back to it again. So it really depends on how much time you have. And you just have to step away a bit. Sometimes even a few minutes is enough. And then come back to your table with a fresh mind.
Okay, Suchita asks again, in your opinion, what makes a story memorable?
Um, when you're reading stories, I'm not a great one for humor writing or reading humorous stories because I feel that that is the most difficult form of writing, humor writing. Very few people can get it right, otherwise it becomes a pain to read that story. I think emotions, stories that touch your emotions, and stories that have a kind of a shock factor, those are the ones that make them very memorable. So even when you're watching something on TV, when the story takes a sudden twist at the end and there's a twist in the tail, and you're shocked, like, how did this happen? You will not forget that story. Or when your emotions have been touched so much that you've actually cried with the story or you've laughed with the story, those are the times I find that
Memorable.
stories become memorable.
Okay, do you make notes on what you want your character to be like? It allow it, or you allow it to evolve as you write?
Um, I think the best thing to do is to have certain notes for consistency. Where the story is concerned, you asking about character, I know, but when the story is concerned, lots of writers tell me different things. There are writers who plan it so well, like in Ashwin Sanghi, for instance. He tells us that he plans it so well that he's written down all the points of every chapter. He knows from beginning till end what is going to happen in each chapter and what's going to happen at the end of the story. He sketched out his characters and everything. Then there are other authors who just say, we sit down and we just start writing. And after some time, the characters take over themselves and they tell the whole story. It's like, you are in a kind of a meditative trance where you don't even know what happened. Somebody else came and told the story. So it depends on different styles of writing. But for characters, I really think one should write down at least the
Right
basic
now.
points of all characters and build them up for consistency, if nothing else. And also for, if you must have read some books where, you start a book and there are so many characters that have been introduced. After some time, you get confused and you keep flipping back the pages to see who was this character, ye kaun tha, ye kab maine padha, or ye, what was the name of this person,
Yes, that
how is he
happens.
or she related. It happens. And those are the most irritating books because, you don't want to keep going back and breaking the flow of the story. So if so most authors, what will they do? They will assign a certain characteristic or maybe a habit to a character, and so they will, whenever they introduce, for instance, if the name is Himani, and Himani has like a she always snaps her fingers when she says something. So every time Himani comes on, they'll always say, hey, they heard a snap of the finger and Himani spoke up. So
It's
sometimes those
mine.
quirks or those little mannerisms are something that help remind you of who the character is or was. But these things will only happen if there's consistency, which will happen if you make notes.
We take another one. Gunjan is asking, how will we know it's the right time to end the story?
Well, the right time to end the story, for instance, if you have a word limit to which you have to adhere, that's when it comes. You have to stop there. But that would be the most, uh, that will not really be a good story because if you suddenly end it, uh, obviously you have not thought through the story then. A story needs, one of the things that particularly short story writers very often do is they start off a story beautifully, they build the characters, they talk about them, and then suddenly they'll realize, oh, the story is becoming too long and suddenly end it. But you need a good conclusion. Otherwise, you've left the reader really floundering. It's like, bringing somebody to a pitch of emotion and then suddenly dropping them in cold
True.
water. So that doesn't help. So, if you know your whole story, then you obviously you have to have a good beginning. You have to have a big, good body of copy in the middle where you're building up the story, and then you have to have a denouement where you're kind of starting to end it and a good conclusion.
Definitely. Leha asks, what is that element in a story that makes the reader find relatable, like the writer has truly gone into their mind?
I find it is when you share a bit of yourself. It's very important for a storyteller to be able to share bits and pieces of themselves, of their experiences, their pain, their happiness, their emotions. So when you share a bit of yourself, either when you're orally telling a story or when you're writing it, I think that's the time readers are able to relate to it very well.
But then your audience becomes judgmental also many times because they know that this writer is transparent and he or she is writing, mixing their personal characters and emotions also.
Yeah,
So,
but no, I don't find that at all. I find that audience and readers really appreciate honesty. And honesty does not mean that you have to, for instance, if you've been married twice or you've, been ditched or you've ditched someone, you don't have to say, I ditched the person or I got married twice. What I mean by sharing your experiences is that um,
yes,
you've dipped into your own personal life
giving a
and you've
name.
shared the experiences without even revealing it's you. But yes, when you reveal bits of yourself in column writing or stories, I've always found that audiences are very appreciative and they love an honest story. They like it.
Appreciate. Yes. So I guess we are done with the questions. There are no more questions.
Okay.
Okay. Just a last bit you want to add to this session before we close in?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I want to talk about really the. Why should we write stories and why do we tell stories? We spoke about why we tell stories because we all want to share. We all want to connect. I think writing is very important. I think writing is something that everyone should make it a part of their lives, of their daily routines. Why? Because it helps offload your excess of emotions when you're writing something. And when you write something, sometimes you clear the clutter in your own mind. So whether it is a story or it is a personal experience or your personal diary that you're writing, I think everybody should really get down to writing, and you will realize what a
Yes,
difference that's going to make to your lives. It really does.
definitely.
Yes.
Okay, Leha also adds, honesty speaks through writing, and those pieces really reach the heart.
Sorry, just read it out again, please.
She's just adding to
You're
our
talking
conversation.
right now. Yeah, honesty speaks through writing, and those pieces really, yes, they do, Leha. They do, don't they?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, with this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you very much, Vinita ma'am, joining for us, and
Thank
thank you
you. Thank
everybody
you
for
so much.
joining in.
Thank you, Gitika,
Okay.
and thank you everybody who's joined them today. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
very
I love
much.
it.
Bye bye. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.